There were a lot of people, and some states wanted, during the ratification conventions for the Constitution, some really, really wanted a complete separation of powers where every branch has its own responsibilities and none of the branches could touch each other or influence each other in any way whatsoever. James Madison addressed that when he said, I shall undertake to show that unless these departments be so far connected and blended as to give each a constitutional control over the others, the degree of separation which the maxim of Montesquieu requires as essential to free government can never in practice be duly maintained. So he's saying, complete separation would be great. It's just not practical. It's not going to work. Because what happens if you have an executive that starts to exceed his responsibilities, starts to exceed his authority? If there's not a mechanism for the legislative branch or the House of Representatives or the Senate or the judicial branch to reach over and stop him or her, then we're going to have a problem. You're going to end up with every one of these branches of government taking on authority without any way to really constrain them. So the idea is that each branch would be given some level of control, some checks against other branches of government. So if the executive branch starts to overstep his bounds, then the House of Representatives or the Senate can step in and curtail that. Now, the founding fathers thought, in setting it up this way with these checks and balances, they assumed that every single branch of government, because people want power, that every branch of government would jealously guard its own authority. And it hasn't really turned out that way. We have judges who are reinterpreting the Constitution and creating new laws. In the case of the Affordable Cares Act, or commonly known as Obamacare, when it came through the Supreme Court, it was unconstitutional as written. And one of the judges took it upon himself to rewrite that law so that it would fit and it could squeak through the Supreme Court. That is not the job of the judicial branch. It looks at the law. Is it constitutional or not? It can point out what parts of the Constitution are unconstitutional, and then you send it back to the legislative branch to do it. It's not the judge's responsibility to step in and help the legislature write laws. Huge overstep. And what happened as a result of that? The other branches did not exert their influence to stop that. We also have executive orders that are raining down like nobody's business. And this is not unique to any political party. They're all doing it. They're creating laws when the executive branch has no business creating laws. You also have legislators and the House of Representatives and the Senate who have delegated lawmaking authority to federal agencies. So we don't want to make all these laws. We'll give you authority to you figure out what the laws are and you just implement them. So you got this situation where if something goes wrong, the legislators, our representatives, can say, oh, wasn't us, it was those guys. And those guys can say, you gave us the authority. So it's a finger pointing game, and they're able to avoid responsibility. It has not worked out in practice where each branch of government is exerting its checks and balances on others. They have let each other get away with stuff, and that's a problem. And that's one of the reasons why we have seen growth in government, growth in federal power beyond anything that the founders had hoped for. I want to spend just a quick minute talking about what some of those checks and balances are. I do want to spend some time in a later episode going in depth into what the different federal powers are versus state powers and what all the checks and balances are. But just to kind of give you a little bit of an introduction, for example, the House of Representatives and the Senate have to approve each other's bills. And if they both agree, the law goes to the president for approval. And the president should be looking at those laws to determine whether they're constitutional or not. If they are constitutional, he should sign them. If they're not constitutional, then he should veto them. But that's not where the buck stops either. If the House of Representatives and the Senate still want to pass the law, they can if they can get 2/3 of both houses to agree to pass it. So in this case, the executive has a check on the legislative, but they can countermand that. And there are so many instances like this where there's these little hooks from one branch into another that allows them to keep each other honest. And it really, the way that they have synthesized all these different things is brilliant. The president can nominate judges to the Supreme Court and to lower courts, but the Senate has to confirm them. The House of Representatives can impeach the president, but to remove him completely from office, you have to have an agreement by the Senate. The executive is responsible for enforcing the laws passed by Congress. But what happens if he takes it upon himself, or she takes it upon herself, to exceed his mandate, to enforce laws that the legislature didn't pass? Well, the legislature has control of the purse. The House of Representatives in particular, is completely in control of the budget. So the executive is overstepping their bounds. You can cut off the money supply so that they can't. You can choose not to fund those things that he's doing that are inappropriate. So anyways, these are just a few examples, but they're interwoven throughout the entire Constitution. And the way that they did this is where they really took what Montesquieu and others had done and made it their own, applied their own common sense, their own experience to weave this web of interconnected dependencies between the branches of government to keep things in check. And it has done a remarkable job. I talked about some of the problems. And if each branch would guard its powers as jealously as the founders thought they would, it would be even better. But one of the reasons why this is the longest running constitution in world history is because of the way that they masterfully crafted those things together. And we owe them a great debt of thanks for the mental muscle that they put into figuring all this out for us. It seems obvious to us now today, but that's just because they did the hard work for us. And thank goodness for them.